The gold-silver ratio. It used to be like this, nearly 15 ounces to 1 ounce of gold, and now it's over 90 to 1. So what's actually the real ratio? Why is it important? And will this ever happen again, making all of this worth considerably more gold than it once was? Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and welcome to another precious metal ramble. The gold-silver ratio has often been cited as the main indicator of which metal is more beneficial to buy right now. And indeed, a lot of commentators on gold and silver feel that if that ratio ever dropped back to the historical lows where we had 15 to 1, 16 to 1 when silver was money, that buying this stuff now is the best decision that you could ever make. To put it in context, if we get these 3 1 kilo bars of silver, that's 96 ounces. So a little higher than that ratio is currently at 90 to 1. And then you get the 1 ounce of gold. You can see there the difference. That is a huge stack of silver relative to gold. If we go back to something more like 14.5 ounces to 1, you can really see the stark difference there for the gold-silver ratio. But this is never going to happen again. Certainly not in the way that the world currently is. It would need a major, major reset in our culture, in our way that we interact with money. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't necessarily understand that that history, that culture, is not to be repeated for very valid reasons. So I want to talk today a little bit about the gold-silver ratio, the fundamental flaws of going back to any kind of gold standard and using silver as cash, as money again, and why we should not put all of our eggs into this silver basket when thinking about what's going to happen in the future. Now, I'm not making a financial advice video here, I'm just talking about my thoughts and opinions. I could be completely wrong, who knows? We could see a return to a gold standard tomorrow. Don't think it's very likely, but if it is, then that's the way it is. I don't mean this in a disparaging way to anybody out there who believes vehemently that silver will return to be money. But I just don't see it happening at all. So to rely on it happening as part of your investment strategy, as part of your stacking strategy, I think is a little bit naive. Now, the world has significantly changed throughout history. We've seen gold and silver, of course, being used as money for all of this time throughout history. And again, that's one of the arguments that's cited as to why gold and silver are so good. But the big thing that's always been on my mind is that ultimately it's just a lump of metal. It's just something that is there that we give value to as society. As human beings, we give money value. No other animals on this planet actually give any kind of value to anything that they have other than perhaps food. You know, they can be very territorial about food, but they don't use it necessarily as a bargaining tool. But we as society use this as a common denominator for wealth. We can exchange it for money, and that money then we can exchange for various different goods and services that keep us alive, keep us fed, warm, clothed, housed. So it is this interesting concept that we as society have created, and we've moved away from that now. We are a very different society than we were back when we were using gold and silver as real money. Now, historically, the reasons why gold and silver were used is because they were an ability, or they were a vehicle, I should say, to transport wealth through time. Gold lasts forever, pretty much forever. It's so inert, it won't react with the atmosphere. Iron will rust. You know, all of the other types of elements out there will ultimately fail down. But gold and silver are always very, very safe. And that's what traditionally gold and silver were used for, to transport wealth through monarchies and dynasties and emperors and empires. And then in the 1800s, it was used very much as that gold standard, this idea that there was this common denominator for all the different countries around the world as they started to become more interconnected and more interwoven with their finances and economies. There needed to be a way that we could trade with the US or trade with France or Germany at a fixed rate so that we knew what we were doing with the different currencies. And the gold standard was what was born of that. But unfortunately, that didn't last, and we did see, of course, the rise of fiat currencies more and more into the early 20th century, eventually moving away from gold standards because they are very restrictive. They give not a lot of wiggle room for emergencies. And of course, the First World War comes along and all of these major economies around the world start to move away from that gold standard because they just need to do something different. And then moving into the later 20th century and early 21st century, of course, we're in a digital world, in a different world now. And there is no real need for cash, for money that's in your pocket. And traditionally, of course, this stuff would have been real. It would have been bullion in bank vaults. But a lot of countries around the world now don't really have that. There are some, don't get me wrong, that will be focusing on gold and having that real stuff. It's still got a role to play going forward into our world, but it's not got the same influence that it once had on us everyday people, on everyday trade. It's just a metal. It just sits there. It is valuable still, and we have still got this cultural attachment to it as something that holds value, but where that will be in 100 years' time is a very interesting question to think about. Now, the premise of this video is that we're not going to see a return to the gold standard, which is the only way that you'd ever see silver get to that historical ratio of 15:1. Industry has changed drastically since we left the gold standard, and silver is now primarily an industrial metal. It has been for a while now, and it will not change, I think, for a good long time. A lot of the new arguments as to why silver is great, not that it will return to that 15:1 ratio because it's a monetary metal, but instead because it's an industrial metal, and it will be used within solar technology and various other industries around the world. And I would tend to agree. I think silver's role in the future is very much as a technological industrial one rather than a monetary metal. So there are a whole host of different ways of thinking that lead me to suggest that gold and silver still have a role to play, but will not go back to that historical lows. So when I look at my gold and silver, I really do not see money anymore. I see an asset. I see something that we can use as a vehicle to protect wealth rather than an actual piece of currency or money. Now, a lot of people find that very difficult to get past, and certainly some of the older generation, the stacking generations that were 30, 40, 50 years ago, when they were actually perhaps even seeing silver in circulation still, can very much disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. I have no qualms of those disagreements. The gold-silver ratio, though, still can play a role in stacking strategies. I still think that there's room for wiggle as tastes and flavours of months and industries on different years and different uses for silver. I mean, there could be new silver uses found tomorrow, which would propel that ratio in either direction. And I still think there is this ratio game that can be played, but of course our old friend premiums come into play here. So whilst this example I gave of 90:1, okay, we've got 96 here, but it's still the premise of 90:1 gold to silver. That's not really how it works right now. If you take in the premiums, both on gold and silver, you're actually looking right now at more like 75:1, which is approximately that. So you've got this whole bunch of silver, nearly 20 ounces worth spare, that are not in that ratio. So it is an interesting one. If you can get silver right now at that spot price, and I've said this time and time again, if you can get them at metals at the spot price and play that ratio, it's a great way to be able to look to how to increase your stack. You've only got to look at the past 2 years to see we got up to 131 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, back down to 65 ounces. That's a huge shift. You could have easily doubled the amount of silver that you've got in your stack, or gold, if you played the ratio either way. But don't rely on that 15:1 magic number. A lot of articles and a lot of historical, data would suggest that one day we're going to get back there, but it will be completely reliant on silver being used as a monetary metal again. And whilst there might be some very, very vehement arguments from some silver tubers and articles online on various different social media platforms, it's just not likely to happen. It really isn't. I've talked in different videos about the reasons why the gold standard won't return. In this modern world that we're in, industry aside, it's just not practical. We are a completely different society than we were 100 years ago. And this stuck in the mud look that people have, where they can only look at what has happened in the past to instill what will happen in the future, I think is not good. I think you've got to look at the present to instill where things will be in the future. And the past has a role to play, but it's certainly not something that will repeat. The world is so different. It is so different, and it will not get back to that time. Now, as I said, I could be wrong, and this video doesn't pretend to be financial advice, but for me, it's not about that ratio. It's not about buying silver right now to hold for when it's quadrupled, quintupled in value. It's about just having something that's real and physical, and that is the key message out of here. Whilst money as silver is no more and probably won't be used ever again, it's still something that's valuable. We are making our own money with the silver that we have. We are being our own bank to a certain degree. The only issue is that it's not necessarily as good as it once was, and that's the key message to take out from here. A big thank you to all of you BYB Rambling Society members for watching and listening to me talk about silver and waffle on to the end. For that, you are cool. Thank you. And if you have watched to this point and you've not subscribed, there's a good chance you'll like some of the videos that we make in the future. Otherwise, a thumbs up really helps all of the YouTube algorithm stuff. We'll see you on the next video. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.